Hi, I'm Abby Peretz. If you read my bio, part of it says Abby has worked as a professional writer for over 20 years and has written for some of the biggest brands in the world. If you do a little bit of Googling, you can pretty quickly discover that I've written for companies like Pfizer, Microsoft, Toyota, and a couple other household names. Here's what my bio doesn't say about me. It doesn't say Abby dropped out of college twice and has no degree. It doesn't say Abby once wrote an entire ebook for a guy who refused to pay her. It doesn't say Abby once had a potential client who wanted to pay her $2,500 a month to write blog posts, and she completely screwed it up by not asking a very simple question, and they totally trashed her on the internet. But all of those things are true. If you hang out in the online business world, you start to hear about things like mindset and leveling up. Now, I know those sound like buzzwords, but they're actually relevant and important. So first, let's talk about mindset. Now, mindset, there are two kinds, growth and fixed mindset. And those are terms that were coined by Stanford researcher Carol Dweck, who literally wrote the book on mindset. It's called Mindset, and it's a great book. So people with a fixed mindset believe that you're either smart or you're not. You have a certain amount of intelligence that you're born with, and that's it. You can learn new things, sure, but you can't change your fundamental intelligence. You're a certain kind of person, and you can't really do anything to change that. When you have a growth mindset, on the other hand, you recognize that nothing is set in stone. You can learn new things, and you can learn them no matter how old you are or how many times in the past someone told you that you couldn't. When you have a growth mindset, you get joy from hard work and striving to be your best. You don't have to be the best. You just have to put in effort and do your best. Now, a lot of us have gone through formative experiences in childhood or adolescence that lead us down the fixed mindset path. And here's the thing. I'm not saying that if you had a bad childhood, you automatically have a fixed mindset. Plenty of people overcome adversity and live fantastic lives. Even more fascinating, when I say that it's a formative experience in childhood or adolescence, it doesn't mean that something terrible happened to you or that you had bad parents. Think back to when you were in elementary school. You came home from school one day with an A+ on your spelling test, and your parents were like, "Oh my gosh, you're so smart." And they tacked that test up on the fridge exactly where you want it to be so that everyone who comes into the house can see it. Now, a week later, you take another spelling test, only this time you miss a few words. You wind up with a 70%. Do you run home and show that test to your parents? Probably not. Probably you shove it to the bottom of your bag. After all, you aced that first test because you're smart. So your grade on this one must mean that you're not so smart after all. Now, let's rewind that scene. You get that A+ on the first spelling test, and your parents tell you, "Wow, you must have worked really hard." They stick that test up on the fridge in pride of place and show it to everyone who comes in, and you feel great. Now, the next week, you don't study as hard, and you get a 70% on the test. So that 70 is no longer a declaration about your intelligence, but rather a factual reflection on your choice to spend your time playing hopscotch instead of studying your spelling words. It doesn't mean that you're not smart. It just means that you didn't work as hard, you didn't study as long, you didn't really put in effort. When we tell our kids things like, "Wow, wow, you did that so fast. You're so smart. Or, whoa, your drawing is amazing. You are such an artist. Or, oh my gosh, you're like a prodigy on the piano. It sounds supportive, right? But what our kids hear is, if it takes me a long time to learn something, that must mean I'm not so smart. Or I better only draw pictures of horses because I won't look like much of an artist if I try to draw anything else. Or I should concentrate on these easy piano pieces because otherwise they're going to figure out that I'm not that great. And those are the things that you might have heard and thought when you were growing up. Again, it doesn't mean that your parents were doing anything wrong. They just didn't know any better. Now, Carol Dweck, that Stanford researcher, ran a well-reported study that she repeated with hundreds of children in schools across the United States. Here's what they did. They gave the kids 10 pretty hard problems to solve, and all of these problems were taken from what's called a nonverbal IQ test, so like math and patterns and things like that. The kids mostly did pretty well. And then Carol and her team did one of two things. For half of the kids, they said to them, "Wow, you got 8 right. That's a really good score. You must be smart at this." So here, they praised kids for their ability. And for the other half of the kids, they said, "Wow, you got 8 right. That's a really good score. You must have worked really hard." So here, they praised the kids for effort. That was the only difference. What happened next? They offered all the kids the chance to complete a challenging task that could teach them something new. 90% of the kids praised for effort, you must have worked really hard, agreed to try the new task. But the ability kids weren't interested in doing anything that could make anyone question their ability. Then, after that, the team gave all the kids a set of problems to solve that were harder than the first set. Suddenly, the ability kids, you must be really smart, were left feeling like they weren't very smart, and they made comments that reflected that. Success meant they were smart, so failure must mean they were deficient. But the effort kids never even thought they failed. They thought, I have to work harder at this. They didn't see the problems as any kind of reflection on their intelligence. There's more. The first time the kids did the problems, all the kids enjoyed the exercises. But after the ability and effort groups were set, and the ability kids didn't do so well on the second set of problems, they didn't even like the work anymore. But the effort kids, they loved the harder problems. They said those problems were the most fun, even when they didn't get them right. And then the researchers gave the ability kids easy problems to do. Based on their results on the first set of problems, these should have been a breeze. But because their intelligence had been called into question, they actually wound up doing worse. But the effort kids sailed through the easy problems. And the last bit about this study that's equal parts fascinating and horrifying is that when researchers told the kids, hey, we're going to do these problems with kids in a bunch of other schools, could you tell them what you think? And they gave them a page where they could write what they thought and a space where they had to write their scores. Can you guess what happened? Almost 40% of the ability kids lied about their scores. So kids who were praised for their intelligence ultimately did worse on tests than kids who were praised for their effort. And 40% of those kids lied to make themselves look better. When Carol Dweck talks about this, she says, "We took ordinary children and made them into liars by telling them they were smart." Right? Horrifying. By praising kids for their intelligence, Dweck and her team put them into this fixed mindset state of mind. So if you've spent your life shying away from things that don't come naturally to you because you're afraid of making mistakes, you might have a fixed mindset. None of us is born with a fixed mindset. If you have kids, think about what they do when they learn to crawl, sit up, walk, and run. They fall down. But we don't tell them, don't try that again. In fact, we cheer them on. We encourage them to get up and try again. Yet when it comes to ourselves, we expect instant perfection, and we think something's wrong with us if we have to practice or work at something. But here's the thing. Nothing's wrong with you. You're just trying something new. A couple of weeks ago, I went on vacation with my family. Now, at home, I run every morning on a treadmill, but where we were staying, there wasn't a treadmill, so I had to run outside. The treadmill is a flat surface. Outside, there are hills. Plus, it happened to be over 100 degrees at 7 p.m. when I laced up my sneakers and hit the pavement. I gave up on running about 6 minutes in and switched to walking. I could come back from that and say, well, I'm a failure, or I'm totally lazy, or I'm not good enough, or maybe I'm just someone who's destined to spend middle age out of shape. Or I could choose to identify myself as a person who tries new things even when they're hard. So that's mindset. And a growth mindset is something that's truly critical for you to have. You have to be willing to try new things and even fail at them sometimes when you're learning and growing. And that's what brings us to leveling up in your freelance business. Leveling up can take a lot of different forms. Declaring you're a freelancer for the first time, sending a proposal to your first potential client, doubling your rates, or breaking up with a client who doesn't respect your boundaries. All of those things are leveling up, moving to a new level in your business. And it's not easy, but you have to power through if you're going to make progress. Have you ever done the thing where you load up your to-do list with things that you know you can do really quickly or without making much effort? Things like load the dishwasher, reply to email, schedule my haircut, post to Instagram, create a new graphic for my homepage, change my headline on LinkedIn, or even engage in a Facebook group. None of these tasks are going to take you more than 30 minutes, and none of them should take too much effort. But here's my question for you. Are any of them going to get you closer to where you want to be? I've definitely created a lot of lists just like this one. They feel good because they're all things that I can do. I can cross them off, feel super accomplished, get that dopamine hit in my brain. But here's the thing. When I stop and think, what did I do today to get more clients in my freelance writing business? Not much. When I think, what did I do to take my business to the next level? Yeah, not so much. Changing your LinkedIn headline and engaging in Facebook groups won't get you there. But it's so rewarding to cross them off the list. When you want to level up in your business, you have to be willing to do hard things. Sometimes that looks like saying no to a client who wants you to write a 4,000-word white paper for $50. Maybe leveling up for you is getting on a Zoom call, even if English is your second language and you're a little bit worried about how you might sound. But you know that you can talk about how to best serve that client, so you get on the call anyway. Maybe leveling up for you looks like applying for a project that you know you can do, even when the budget is more than you've ever been paid for anything in your entire life. So there are a couple of things that you can do to work on your mindset and level up. First, like I mentioned, read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck so that you know and understand more about growth and fixed mindsets. Awareness is really key. Next, Start to pay attention to the messages you give yourself every single day. Anytime you catch yourself thinking or saying negative things about your abilities, stop. Really hear what you're saying and counter that statement with a positive message about your effort. For example, when you find yourself thinking, I'm just no good at marketing myself, change that message to, I'm going to put in the time to learn how to market myself effectively. Remember that change is hard and it takes time. Most importantly, change requires consistency. You have to work at it regularly. So here's an exercise I'd like you to try. Think about a mistake you made recently. It could be something that went wrong at work or with a client, or something at home, a dinner that you burned, or the time you congratulated your niece on her pregnancy, only to realize she was very not pregnant. It could be when you snapped at one of your kids, or your spouse, or the lady in the checkout line and regretted it, or when you got all the way to work and realized you left your wallet at home. So put yourself back in that moment. What happened? Were you able to fix the problem? What happened then? And how did you feel? Now, think about what you told yourself in that moment, and then later when you thought about it again, and write down the messages you gave yourself. Think about the worst things you tell yourself. I'm not smart enough to do this. I've screwed up so many times before. I don't deserve to be happy. Take a few seconds and think about those things that you're telling yourself. Think about the stories you've started to believe. Do me a favor. Find a picture of one of your kids on your phone. If you don't have kids, someone you care about. Pull out your phone, find that picture, and look at it for a second. Imagine saying the things you say to yourself to that person in the picture. When you have a few minutes, find a picture of yourself from kindergarten or first grade and pin it up in your office or wherever you work, and stick a copy of that picture on your phone as well. And the next time you start to tell yourself these stories, these lies, pull out that picture and remember that you're saying those things to that person. Think about kids and their own struggles. They have to learn to sit up, to crawl, to read, to add, to do long division, which personally I think is useless. It's not easy, and they screw up a lot. But you never dream of saying to kids, hey, you clearly are not meant for walking or reading or math. You should just lie there. Don't attempt anything. We don't say these things because we're not crazy. And we're not cruel, except to ourselves. So can you be gentler with yourself? Is there a way you can reframe those messages that you gave yourself when you made that mistake? Could you reframe those for growth? Think about how you could do that, how you could reframe those messages about the things that you're going to learn how to do, or that you're going to learn how to do better, or that you might not know how to do yet, but you will in the future. You're here watching this video because you want to grow as a freelancer. You want to earn more money, work with better clients, and take on work that pushes you to excel. And you can do that, but only if you're willing to push yourself and grow. Only if you're willing to make mistakes and learn from them. 1 year from now, you could be the person here giving this talk. Here's what you have to do to make that happen. First of all, you have to decide that that's what you want. When I got my first job as a freelance writer, I had nothing special going for me. I was a college dropout twice over, but I wanted to be a freelance writer, so I decided that I would figure out how to do that and make it work. 2, you have to get okay with learning. You can find courses and ebooks and podcasts and whatever you want right from your phone. Whatever you want to do, you can find someone else who has already done it and figured out the path and who will show you exactly what to do. And the third thing that you have to do, and this is probably the hardest, you have to acknowledge that the only thing holding you back from what you say you want is you. If you're willing to decide what you want and to get okay with learning, you can have what you want. So there you go. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I hope you learned something, and I'd love to connect with you and hear what you think. You can find me at successfulfreelancemom.com, and I'm on Instagram at Abby Parrots.